Welcome, everyone. We're going to give everyone a few minutes to just settle in. Thank you for being here. You'll notice as you arrive that there's a slide up, and we're here today for the National Restorative Coaching Program webinar. Welcome. And also, we just wanted to let you know about another awesome opportunity that we have through the National Center on Restorative Justice. And that is some scholarship opportunities for professional restorative certificates. And there's certificate opportunities through the Vermont Law and Graduate School, and then also through the University of San Diego. So definitely check that out. There's some links here. Welcome, everyone. We're just giving people a moment to get settled and to come in to the room. Okay, we will get started now. Thank you. So we're here for a webinar on restorative justice program implementation, and it's going to be offered by members of our National Restorative Coaching Team through the National Center on Restorative Justice. So we're very excited to have Hassani Hilton, Taninia Hekimara, and Francisco Carbajal here with us. I'm Justine Andreo Darling, and I'm the Associate Director of the Center for Restorative Justice. And also, I help coordinate this coaching program, which is why we're here today. I'm also here with Katie Wilson, and she helps coordinate the program as well, and we'll be moderating the panel today. So, welcome, everyone.
Thanks, Justine. Yes, my name is Katie Wilson, and I work at the Center for Restorative Justice as a program coordinator. And I also have the honor of helping with the National Restorative Coaching Program. So, just a brief agenda overview for our next hour plus together. We are going to share a little bit about the National Restorative Coaching Program. And we are going to introduce our three coaches who are our panelists today. So you'll get to learn a bit about them. And they are going to be sharing their wisdom, expertise, experience around the topics of program implementation and having a discussion with us. Program implementation across the board in criminal justice system, the K through 12 education system, as well as nonprofit sectors, and sharing a bit about their experience. We will have time for a Q&A portion at the end of the webinar, so we invite you, as questions come up throughout the webinar, just drop your questions into the chat and we will be able to answer them towards the end. Thank you all for being here.
All right, so what is coaching? Well, we've had this coaching program for about 2 years now, and we have an amazing team of about 13 coaches that are working with practitioners all over the nation. And it's a really powerful program because of the partnerships that are built. And I'll just share this quote about what is coaching in general. And that's really what we try to stick to in this program. So, coaching is the art of facilitating another person's learning, development, well being, and performance. Coaching raises self-awareness and identifies choices. Through coaching, people are able to find their own solutions, develop their own skills, and change their own attitudes and behaviors. So, in this program, and why we decided to do this webinar today on implementation is because we've noticed over the last couple of years that, you know, trying to implement restorative justice in different sectors is one of the greatest challenges that we're all facing on many different levels. And so we wanted to provide this opportunity for some of our amazing coaches just to share their experiences out there in the field. And we see this coaching relationship more as like a thought partnership so that we can all stay connected to one another, and through those connections and relationships we can really strengthen the work that we're trying to do and strengthen our own well-being as well, because it's important to be connected.
So, just a few details about our coaching program. If you are interested in being coached by one of our coaches, we'll have more information at the end of the webinar. But you can be eligible for up to 8 hours of free coaching, and that's over a 6 month time span. So, usually practitioners choose about 8 1 hour sessions to meet individually with a restorative coach. And I think a really important thing about our program is that it is really holistic in nature, and our coaches meet you where you are at. So, some practitioners choose to focus on skills and techniques of facilitation, and some really use the time for self reflection, as Justine said, as having a thought partner to bounce ideas off of, and really just growing in confidence building around these restorative efforts. And so it really is a wonderful collaboration between coach and practitioner throughout the 6 months of the partnership.
Thanks, Katie. So I'm really excited to finally get to the best part here, which is to introduce our three coaches here today. So we have Hassani Hilton, who is the founder and chief executive officer of Humanity Investment Group. We have Taninia Hakimara, who's a restorative justice and culture of belonging consultant, and Francisco Carbajal, the founder of Peace, Anger, Love. It's just such an honor to have all of you here today. And we wanted to start with the first round and panel question of just asking a little bit about who you are and what are the main roles that you play in your life. So I'll pass it over to Taninia to get us started with that check-in question. Thank you, Taninia.
Thank you, Justine and Katie. My name is Taninia Hekimara. I was born into justice work. That's who I am. Both of my parents did justice work, and my grandparents moved in order for their kids to have a better education. So I'm also steeped in the importance of education and supporting education, schools in general. I'm a mother, I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, I'm a friend, I'm an auntie, and that's who I am. That's the main crux of who I am. In terms of the work that I do, I work primarily with pre-K through 12 schools. I do work with some nonprofits, and I work with some universities. And the scope of my services includes training the trainer, holding circles. I do a inclusive curriculum with the schools. Um, and that's pretty much it. I love the coaching part of what I do. I have some individual coaching that I do, and then I do lots of coaching through this program, which I'm just very, very grateful for. So welcome. And I'm going to pass it to Paco.
All right, thank you. Yeah, my name is Francisco Carbajal, but as you heard, my nickname is Paco. Born and raised in San Diego, California, and Tijuana, Mexico. I do want to say really quick, and a couple of you have heard me say this before, that really my whole journey when it came to restorative justice started before I was even born, with a lot of the great work that my mom, my grandma, my great grandma were doing in the community here in Tijuana, San Diego, and Los Angeles. So a lot of great community work that was instilled within me since before I was here. And of course, as a young boy, seeing a lot of people from the community come to our home every Saturday morning to pick up rice and beans and clothes. Beautiful work that I was able to witness thanks to the work and the women in my life that I like to say. Of course, as I was growing up, I took part of the best and not the so best that the community had to offer. With that, I found music as my self-care, which I always preach when we're doing this coaching program with our individuals, is to always practice self-care. For me, was music. I traveled quite a bit in a couple different punk rock bands. And after that, decided to settle down and go to the San Diego State University. And after that, I discovered something called a Western term that we like to say restorative justice, which was, as soon as I heard about it, I'm in. Was just anything I can do to help our community heal, be held accountable, but most importantly, come together as a community was a key for me. I'm a founder of Peace, Anger, Love, advocating for restorative justice, divergent programming, capacity building, technical assistance, assistant director of staff support at San Diego migrant shelters, implementing restorative responses in employee relations and human resources. And I'm a member of the California Restorative Justice Policy Coalition, which I'll share a little bit about that as we go. So I'll pause right there and pass it over to Asani.
Awesome. Thank you, Paco. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure, truly a pleasure to be here. I am Hassani Hilton. The hats that I wear, just like Taninia, I'm a mother, loving family member, friend, active member of the DC community. Honestly, I wear too many hats, so we'll have to do another webinar for me to cover them all. But aside from me being one of the coaches in the National Restorative Coaching Program, I support NYU's Silver School of Social Work in their Office of Global and Lifelong Learning. They are preparing to launch their post-grad RJ certification program. So supporting them in the design and overseeing that process to be launched in spring 2025. It's really exciting just to see more and more academic institutions helping to prepare so many practitioners that are on the rise and those that are already in the work who want to further develop themselves. It is definitely exciting to be a part of that journey. Always supporting the vision and mission of Humanity Investment Group and all of the philanthropic initiatives that we do, along with training and restorative justice workshops and supporting people in program design. That is one of the passions that I love. Being a trainer now, I almost don't want to say it. When I was doing the calculations, I said, okay, it's almost 30 years, but we'll leave that there. I started as a toddler. I'll just say that. But working as a trainer now for almost 30 years. And because I was a trainer, being able to qualify to be trained in restorative justice training and circle facilitation, becoming a master trainer 20 years ago, and supporting so many individuals who have the passion to do this work, who all they need is to match their passion with the knowledge and skills, and being a part of that process has truly, truly been an honor. My dad has always been involved in diversion programming here in Washington, D.C., and trying to look for ways to keep our young people out of the juvenile justice system, which then transitioned to adults as well. Like Paco, I just coming up in the community and seeing so many things around me, like the loved ones and family members who were being incarcerated for things that were really stemming from trauma that they didn't know how or where to process, and ended up getting caught in cycles that were going on in the community and just ending up incarcerated. I made it my mission to use all of the knowledge that I gained, whether it was through training, whether it was through programming, anything that I could do to keep people away from systems that were not a part of their healing journey. So I'm very excited to be a part of this work and do anything that I can to further support those who are looking to develop themselves. And I will pass it back to our host.
Thank you, Hassani, and thank you to all of you for those beautiful introductions. We are going to bring our slide deck back, and we're going to really turn it over to our coaches at this point. And each coach is going to just be sharing a bit about their experience, sharing any advice that they have to offer in the realm of the task of program implementation. And they're going to be sharing some challenges, some common challenges that come up, and any of their favorite resources. So I'm going to turn it over to Taninia to get us started.
Thank you. So for this webinar, I'm going to stick to what I've learned working in pre-K through 12 schools. Most of the challenges are pretty common across all types of schools. So I work in independent schools, private schools, charter schools, and public schools. Parent resistance is a big one. Oftentimes, what happens is when a student has caused harm, their student has caused harm, they want a restorative practice. But when their student is on the receiving end, they want a punitive. So there's always like this push and pull in terms of what parents expect, right? And the adults who are not familiar with restorative practice believe that kids are getting off easy. And so it really, the schools that bring me in to do parent training for restorative justice to help them understand it tend to be able to change their cultures more. Not enough resources and staff. So oftentimes in the public schools, there's one person who's responsible for the entire district or the entire school. Oftentimes it's the entire district, and one person is not enough. The other issue there is they're usually like middle management, which means they don't have decision-making ability nor the ability to be able to make requests of people. So they are always trying to find the low-hanging fruit in order to move the community along. Time, one thing that I found is teachers never have enough time in the public schools and the charter schools because everything is so strict in terms of what they have to do in their classroom. They feel like if they go off book, which is what they consider slowing down, and doing a restorative conversation or a restorative process or community circles, it takes them away from what they're expected to complete by the end of the year. And so helping them figure out ways to make time for restorative practices is one of the things that I concentrate on. Low resistance. So if the adults in the community have not figured out how to be in generative conflict, it's hard for them to get the students to do it. And their resistance also has to do with if they're feeling some trauma or their nervous system is getting upregulated because it's something that's familiar to them, then they oftentimes have a freeze response. And so really helping them to practice enough in order to be able to be okay with leaning into tough conversations. We're socialized away from that. A lot of us are socialized away from that. And so they have to relearn how to be in generative conflict. Um, the other the other thing that I've noticed is the school or the district will enter into it as if it's a good idea, and they're like, yeah, we're all down for this. And when they realize that part of becoming a restorative practitioner is you really, really have to look at yourself. You have to figure out where you hold power and tend to that. And that we have to look at our own biases in order to be a facilitator. You have to know that these two students that are in conflict, I may be leaning towards one more than the other because I'm familiar with it. It's happened to me, and so on and so forth. And when they find that out, they're like, well, I just wanted to change the students. I didn't know I was going to have to change in the process of this. So really helping them to understand how to be reflective of themselves so that they can be the best facilitator they can be. I'll take the next slide. I guess I want to add one other thing to that previous slide. You don't have to go back. The other is that the institution doesn't realize that it has to change too. So schools' policies can cause harm, and you can't just drop restorative practices in a school without changing the way that the school functions. And so there's oftentimes resistance to that as well. So my advice to new practitioners is to slow down. I often talk about the tenets of white supremacy culture, and one of them is efficiency. And we know that punitive is efficient, right? And that restorative practices slows everything down and tends to all parties in a relational way. And when I say slow down, I mean slow down while designing a circle practice, the prep work and the follow-up. Slow down as you're thinking about it. Rushing into things can oftentimes cause additional harm. Let go of perfectionism. It goes with the next one. RJ is a human and relational process, so there is no perfection when two people are involved. And so I've some of the practitioners that I've coached are afraid to move forward because they're so worried about their design. But let us remember that we have now professionalized this, but it grew from the community and nothing was written down, right? We tended to the needs as they came up. And so letting go of the perfectionism of your circle design and remembering that it's a human process, which means that things are going to happen, circles are going to go awry, and pivoting. And the big thing is having that toolbox to pivot back into circle and knowing when to pause and saying we need to pick this up another time. You want to move at the speed of trust, especially when working with schools. Building trust for the adults in the community that you're working with is extremely important. All of the resistance that I mentioned on the prior slide is where they're really saying, I don't trust this, I don't trust you. It's not personal, but remembering to slow down and we want to be effective, right? So moving slowly enough to build upon their skills, starting where they're at, which is the next one. Starting where they're at is extremely important. There'll always be some people in the community that have been exposed to it and naturally already do it. And those are your allies. Those are your allies. And then you utilize them to help to bring the rest of the community come along. Paco mentioned this, you must take care of yourself. Part of that self-reflection is knowing when and how your nervous system gets upregulated. And I will say that the more you do this, the more you'll be able to settle yourself when listening really to other people's harm and trauma. That's like we've opted into doing that. And you learn to calm yourself. But in the beginning, it can be really tough because we all went to school and we all had certain experiences at school. And so that some of those same things are still happening in schools. And so knowing how to take care of yourself and also during your downtime, whatever makes you happy, that is, that's a good thing to do. Just make sure you're doing that. I have a whole little webinar that I do with my practitioners about how to take care of yourself. And I kind of mentioned this already. Circles they will go sideways. And so one of the things that's helpful to me is always having my toolkit and my alternate options for when a circle moves in a direction that I didn't expect it to. And one of the first things I do is say, there's a need that isn't being met that has nothing to do with this topic. And so we can't get to this topic unless they're able to let energy go around this other topic. And so building your toolkit is really, really important. I will take the next slide. So in terms of resources for pre-K through 12 schools, I say Circle Forward is really good for looking at scripts. I will say that I use it and then I modify it so that it's my own style. So I've never taken one script and used it from front to back. I go there to look for ideas. I want to do this kind of circle. Is there something in here? And then I build it. I also say another resource is any book that helps you deepen your understanding of the harm that happens. And so I read a lot of books about how race and racism shows up in America, gender bias, books that talks about the LGBTQ community, ageism, and just anything that you might possibly come across, to read books on it so that you understand the why it's harmful, especially if your identity doesn't match the identities of the people who have been harmed. Training books about nervous system settling, it's really good for you and to be able to help to teach the children and the adults in a pre-K through 12 setting. I say seek out thought partners, build build a group of people outside of where you're working so that you can, when you run up against something you're not sure what to do, that you're able to talk it through it with someone else. And this organization has lots of cool free stuff so on their website, and so I would say utilize them. The one thing that I left off of here is also books that there's a lot of different practices out there that are similar to restorative justice. So books that are about communication, books that are about how to build a positive culture. Any books along those same lines can be very helpful to you as a practitioner. And I think that I am complete. Thank you for letting me share. I look forward to if you have any questions about anything that I've said here. I will pass it to Paco.
All right. Thank you so much, Tania. It's so funny because you mentioned a script. Actually, I myself need to pull up my script right now for this session, because if not, as you all know, I'll just keep talking and talking and talking. So I definitely want to address a couple situations, especially with this topic that is so important to me. So let me just pull that up real quick and then I'll get going. All right. So yeah, so we were talking about some challenges. So as you know, while RJ, restorative justice in the criminal justice system, we all know it's a promising alternative to traditional punitive measures, but still several challenges arise in its implementation. One significant challenge is ensuring stakeholders' commitment. So for restorative justice to be effective, it requires the buy-in of various parties, including, of course, the people harmed or victims, the responsible parties or the offenders, community members and practitioners and others as well. So each group must be willing to invest time and effort into the process, which can be difficult to secure consistently. So without that united commitment, the restorative process may falter, impacting its overall effectiveness, no matter whether it's a small little pilot, a pretty good sized program, or a county-wide initiative. An example can be of these stakeholders' commitment is in steering committees. So you have community members, advocates, restorative practitioners, and justice partners involved in steering committees. Community members who are continuing the advocacy, who are really the heart and soul in the restorative justice, including the implementation of authentic restorative practices within the restorative justice diversion programs themselves. Of course, you have your justice partners who are part of the conversation as support to the community to ensure, of course, referrals are coming in, but also data and evaluation is being collected, and the paths for equitable expansion are being created as well. Another challenge is maintaining continued community engagement. So restorative justice relies heavily on community involvement, yet sustaining that engagement over time can be very tricky. So communities may become fatigued or lose interest, or other initiatives that are much more important at that moment may take more priority. So diminishing that support that is crucial to the process can really impact forward movement within the community engagement. So it's essential to continually inspire and encourage community participation to ensure that restorative justice initiatives remain strong in the front of the movement and remain impactful. So one of the part where we can really bring in that community engagement back in, keep that engagement coming, is by sharing some of the stories as testimonials, the data, the evaluations that are coming out of the programs. So, but something that's more specific to restorative justice practitioners is strength-based activities are key in restorative justice programs. A lot of our young people have not been able to experience their strengths or discover new passions. So this is how we address their antisocial behavior in one way. We create those strength-based activities within the programming, so they can not only, of course, take accountability through the program, but also discover new passions, also discover new strengths along the way. So activities like indoor rock climbing, which are, at least down here in San Diego, is very important for me to implement these key components of the Restorative Justice Diversion Program. So indoor rock climbing, attaching a story, to that wall that we're about to climb. The challenges that we experience in our life are the locations of where you're about to put your next foot, which stone or which rock are you about to put, so you can keep moving up on that wall, right? So that was very important. Related the activity that you're doing as a practitioner with the youth or the person harmed or the community members that are going to come in to a real life story. So those strength-based activities are very important. Activities like during the pre-meetings, also maybe going to local universities, having a youth meet a soccer player, a soccer captain, the soccer coach. Why? Because you've discovered that's their strength. So concentrating on those also to uplift those moments. Something that is very key also to keep sharing with the community for engagement is advocacy events. I'm sorry, graduation parties first before I talk about advocacy events. Graduation parties are amazing. If some of you have been able to see some of these celebrations at the end of a youth completing the program are amazing. And this is moments we share with the community. People harmed can be invited to those celebrations. The people that came into the circles can be invited to the celebration. Obviously, community leaders, community themselves can come into those celebrations to celebrate our youth, which is very important. And capturing moments, little tiny things like capturing the moments is so important. So inviting a professional photographer to be there to take pictures of the community and the youth and the person harmed and how they were able to come through this difficult moment and get to healing, right? True healing. Those are very important things that we can keep community engagement coming and so on. Additionally, ongoing evaluation of the program is necessary to assess its effectiveness. Regular assessments help identify what is working well, what needs improvement. However, establishing those mechanisms for thorough evaluation can be challenging. So stakeholders need to be clear with their metrics, their methodologies to capture all qualitative, quantitative data related to outcomes and experiences in the restorative justice process. Partnering with universities, like we've done so before with a couple of universities around the Southern California area, is important. Why? Because they have resources right there and they are up to date with their technology in-house that can sometimes come free to nonprofits that are starting to provide programming in their communities. And finally, policy change. So policy change possesses a significant challenge, as we all know. For restorative justice practices to be fully integrated in the criminal justice system, existing laws, the policies, and may need to be reassessed and modified on a yearly basis. So this often involves navigating complex bureaucratic structures, and balancing the interest of various stakeholders, which we know at times can slow down the progress and create some of the resistance. I invite everybody, a nice little plug here, obviously, to join the webinar on November 20th, because a couple of our California Restorative Justice Coalition members will be there, and they'll be able to share a lot of more on the policy change. Next slide, please. All right. So over my lengthy career as a restorative justice practitioner, there are a couple main practices that assisted me with individual cases, with leading teams of restorative justice practitioners, and with expanding justice programming, utilizing ongoing community engagement, first of all, yes, my apologies. I was looking at a different slide, and then this slide came up. It's the reality we're in right now. So advice to practitioners, yes, you're not alone. So utilize your community. That is very important. Utilize your coalition. Utilize the commissions that are around you. That is your other community that are there, so you can continue to learn from what is happening in the trends. The Juvenile Justice Commission, I was commissioner and chair of the Juvenile Justice Commission, and I utilized those resources to network and also be able to bring in more partners and community members into the programming that we were implementing, from a pilot to a program to a countywide initiative. The public safety committees that are out there in your community that any member can go to just listen, to take part, or to advocate for change in the community. All of those, you gain so much knowledge, and you build so much knowledge that you can bring back to your individual cases, to your expansion of a program, of your program, to then, getting into larger conversations about a county-wide initiative. The Restorative Justice Coalition as well, we're doing a lot of advocacy right now around Assembly Bill 60, right? So this now gives all victims, people harm, the right to know of the restorative justice programs at the time of the arrest, right? So that is very important to get that conversations out into the community, and also learn from the community yourself as a practitioner, whether you're a facilitator, you're a manager, or you're a director of the organization, in order to continue being involved in the community, that then in return obviously creates expansion, and that community engagement continues to occur as well. Experience is key. I've always said that it's very important to continue participating at the individual case level. You can come in as a mentor, you can come in as a practitioner, as a facilitator, you can come in as a co-facilitator, and of course, you can come in even sometimes as a surrogate victim, as a person harmed that has been through a similar situation in the past, that you have a little bit of sharing that experience to do. So always continue to build on that. Also put yourself out in mentorship opportunities that you can. If you are going to be a facilitator, if you're going into building teams, it's important to continue being part of also the advocacy work that is going on in your community, whether it's bringing in more mentorship programs, more youth services as well, or participating as a member to coalitions, to commissions, to committees. So all of those are very important things as you continue to build that knowledge in your work. And collaboration. So one of the things that is very important, apart from the steering committees that I mentioned before, was also collaboration within your own team, right? So a lot of us know multidisciplinary team meetings, MDT meetings, right? So it's very important also to come together and learn from each other's individual cases as restorative justice facilitators, and also create spaces, if you are a manager or a lead within your program, also create spaces where other managers can learn from their program facilitators as they are building. So those were very important to create as we were going from a small pilot only in some zip codes in San Diego, to then creating a larger program with a lot more zip codes, a lot more people, a lot of potential hurdles and challenges, where one community had, say, a plethora of youth services. All of a sudden, we've expanded to another community that only has one, say, nonprofit organization providing youth services. So it's all those challenges come along. So it's very important to continue to learn from each other. Next slide, please. All right, resources. So as you've probably heard, I am a lot about strategy, structure, but still building authenticity in creating, our work. And there is a lot of that I've learned from my experience, that is accessible to a lot of us out there. So it's very important to continue to look through city and county reports that are out there within the criminal justice research or clearinghouses. For example, for us, SANDAG in San Diego is the main evaluator for countywide initiatives, and they provide many different reports. And that's how we were able to see that there were racial and ethnic disparities happening in certain areas of our community, that we needed to focus expansion in those areas where the criminal justice system has lacked in efforts. So it was very important to look through those reports, and as we continue to build and expand equitably these programs, we're able to see some of the crime patterns as well, and the strategies that are being created out there that we could potentially partner with that also involve reduction of crime. Many different criminogenic factors. I won't get into that right now. Those are obviously examples like antisocial behavior. I shared a couple examples about how we address that through strength-based partnerships. It's very important to continue to build on our strengths and passions and discover new ones. Those are very important to address that. The crime survivors research and studies that are out there are key, especially in California, as we continue to advocate for restorative justice to continue to expand. It's not just holding the youth accountable, it's also bringing true and a holistic approach and healing for the person harmed. And they are now one of the largest advocates, in this work moving forward. So we need to continue learning from that, getting those data and statistics to us. And of course, we fall, if you haven't yet, Impact Justice. There are some of the true authentic partners that I had as I was growing up in this work. I believe Equal Justice USA now has a restorative justice diversion toolkit, which you can just put that on Google and it will show up. And that is a very key, I want to say, document that has guided me along the way. Of course, you're going to bring in your own style, and also depending on the uniqueness of your programming as it's expanding in those community and those efforts. Of course, that's going to be the uniqueness, but this was a great backbone and foundation for myself and the teams that I've been fortunate to lead throughout my time and career in this work. So with that, hopefully I did not go too long, which is why I had my bullet points, but I'll pass it over to Thani.
Thank you. No, great information has no time, so no worries on that. So talking about some of the common challenges when implementing restorative justice in the criminal justice area. So first of all, I have to say that it has improved a lot from 20 years ago. No, it's now being more welcomed, except sometimes when we're looking at things like buy-in, it can be staggered. Sometimes it's because of, RJ is the new trend. And if this huge city is doing it, then we're a new city and we need to be doing the same. Or people are just following a directive from the higher up saying, okay, we're implementing RJ, and the buy-in is not widespread all over from the top all the way down to those on the front line. And when there's a lack of buy-in, you already know there's a lack of passion, there's a lack of motivation, there's a lack of determination to actually see the process out as it should. I don't like to use the SH word, but as it would be ideally set up to roll out. So sometimes people are doing what we call checking the boxes, where it's like, okay, they said we have to get training. They said that we have to have an RJ coordinator. They said that we need to create a diversion program. And then in the process of checking boxes, when there is a lack of buy-in, a lot of points get missed. I know there's been an example of, let's say there's a new jurisdiction that's saying, we want to use restorative programming, have a diversion program for our defendants that are coming into the system in this one area. You might have all of the prosecutors on board. You might have judges ready that are going to be working with those in that area. But the defense attorneys who are actually in the ears of the person who's being, saying, hey, would you like to take this diversion program here that's restorative, or would you like to go and do the quicker program where you're just in and out, you just go to some classes and go? It's the person's listening, it's like, wait, did you say go to something that's going to make me dig deep, take longer, really get through this in a way that is like internal and have other parties involved and all that, or I can just go take some classes? Okay, maybe I'll go take some classes. So because the buy-in is off balance, you really might have people missing out on a really, really beneficial process that can help in the long term, simply because there's a lack of buy-in. Training without technical assistance, again, I could have a separate webinar just on this challenge alone. There are so many people who, and please know that I would never knock training, I'm a trainer, but there are so many people who feel like they check that box of training, and then they'll say, oh, no, thank you. We don't need technical assistance. We're good. We did this 3-day training, or this 4-day training, sometimes 2-day training, and we're all good now. And they miss the part where, for one, in a training, there's a lot of information to take in. You're getting a lot of information in a very condensed time frame. And often there's not a lot of space to process what you took in, and then to strategize on how to apply the information you acquired. It's like, okay, we took this training, we're trained. And so we hired someone. So we took the training, we hired someone, and now we're all good. Okay. Absolutely not. There are very, very, very few times when you can take a short training and put someone in position, and now you're going to have this successful implementation, this successful rollout. Implementation strategy is essential when you're trying to connect the dots between what you were trained on and how you're going to apply it to all of the areas of your implementation. And so having that ongoing support to be a sound wall, to give consult, in the moment feedback, in the moment, because it's one thing to do a training and say what you could forecast. Okay, hey, you could foresee these things taking place and these are the things you can do. However, having that in the moment kind of consult to be able to sit and meet, and not to mention have a place to practice what you were trained in, it's just essential. And so I always strongly encourage people to have a technical assistance plan. A lot of times trainers actually offer technical assistance, and there are entities that specifically do technical assistance. So I would strongly suggest that people take advantage of that service. It is essential to your implementation process, which then leads to program design and implementation strategy. Without being strategic about how your program is going to be designed, I mean, from the tiniest thing to the biggest, without that macro, micro kind of scope, you basically leave yourself open to even more challenges that can arise. Like Taninia said, and I know even Paco knows, things happen, right? Restorative processes, they're not just always going to be, oh, we did this circle, everything was peaches and cream, now the families are healed, we implemented this program, everybody's doing great. That's just usually not the case. And so having a program design and an implementation strategy that even includes what we will do when things go this way, or what we will do when things don't go in the direction we want, is essential to program success. And of course, again, there are entities that support program design and implementation strategy. And then going on to bureaucracy and red tape. Of course, when you're implementing in the criminal justice system, you're literally working with these justice systems, right? These jurisdiction representatives, you might have district attorneys who are running for office, et cetera. All of these things can impact your program structure. It can impact timing, like when they want to start the program, when they feel like the program needs to end. You know, we need to start as soon as they go into office, or we need to hurry up and start before their their term ends, and or we need to start prior to the election, or we need to start when we have the new attorneys come in. There's so many things that are not a part of, I guess you could say, being restorative that can impact this. The one thing that I can say is when you have that kind of that system in place, you have to remind them that you all want to be restorative, right? You all want this. And there's a beautiful balance of being professional and being restorative and being mindful of the political influence in these spaces. And you just have to keep it in mind and let them know that we will work with as best as we can those kind of dynamics, but we do have to ensure that we are doing what's best for the community that we are serving. And that's pretty much, the best way that you can handle it. And we can talk a little bit more of that balance on the next slide. So with that being said, that restorative mindset and approach, right? That's the beautiful blend of being restorative, being professional, because we are working in systems where it is key to be a realist. We have certain dynamics that we have to pay attention to. However, we still have to be restorative in the meetings that we hold, because we are the people that are coming in to demonstrate what it means to be restorative. So when we hold meetings, it's very similar to holding like a restorative circle, where we save space for coming in and doing a check-in, being mindful of processes that they might not be accustomed to, but demonstrating that this is a little different. We are going to honor your requests to do certain things, but we hope that you can honor the restorative approach in all of the areas, including our communications, including design and implementation, all the way to what we identify as desired outcomes. And then building relationships with key stakeholders, even though that is sort of like it's self-explanatory. I'll just highlight that rapport building is essential. Rapport building is essential in any kind of, business or doing what we're doing. But because a huge part of being restorative is about building relationships. And so having those rapports with those key stakeholders, those all the way to the higher ups, all the way down to those community entities that are going to support your process, it can not only foster cooperation during some of those times that can be challenging, but it can also help with buy-in, because you have a different rapport with them. So your conversations can be a little different, where they're not just getting these directives from higher ups, but they're getting a little bit more insight on what these processes mean, what it really means to have a restorative approach. And that can come from having a good rapport where you can actually have those kind of conversations. And then, of course, it is key to understand those needs and goals of, and I say clients, but sometimes I don't even like using that word, but to keep it just a general. So those people who you're working with, whether it is an organization, whether it's an agency, whether it's an entire community, but truly understanding their needs and their goals. Doing needs assessments are an amazing way to gain a little bit more insight. And needs assessment for those agencies, those organizations, and then of course the community needs assessment, knowing what the communities that they will be serving actually need, that will support you in your design processes. And then of course, developing those strong partnerships and referral sources. A lot of times when you're building these programs, you want to have sort of like a one entity that is going to be the nucleus, that is going to handle the services. A lot of times it is a community-based organization, or it might be an advocacy agency. It is usually basically the primary organization that will be the hub that's going to actually facilitate those services, right? But there are partnerships that can support that organization or agency, that entity, in doing the work that is needs. Those partnerships are strategically selected. It shouldn't be, oh, this is one of the great organizations that get a lot of buzz in the city. I think it would be great to have their name on it. Right. But if they're really busy, they're doing a lot of things, they don't really know a lot about this work, the buzz might not be what you need. It might be a smaller organization that is driven towards restorative approach, really knows the community very well, and organizations as such that could be a part of the partnership. Then when you're working with criminal justice systems, I would say, even though a lot of the referrals are going to come from the justice system, depending on how you design your program, that is key. So yes, you can have referrals that are saying, okay, we want to have all of the misdemeanor property theft crimes that take place, or we want to do a program that's focusing on juveniles or adults that are doing crimes within the community that impact, like stealing cars, or breaking and entering, or whether it might even be domestic violence. You are going to get your primary amount of referrals from maybe the DA's office or another justice-based entity, but expanding your referral sources to the community, so that a lot of times it doesn't even have to go to the justice system. We could have something that happened, and what we would love to see is more community involvement to say, hey, there's a young man next door. He's been breaking into houses in the neighborhood. People are seeing him on the ring door, on the ring doorbell, and we don't want to report him. We know what's going on in the home, and someone like that can be an amazing referral source. So having more of a widespread referral source can not only help to get more, more, I don't want to call it traffic, but to help more people, to have more people come in who can benefit from your program. But it can also empower the community to say that we can rely on restorative alternatives without having it to go to the justice system and then be diverted over to restorative service. We can sort of, like they say, cut out the middleman, right? So on that note, thinking about how your referral sources are set up and those strong partnerships can really benefit your impact to the community. Going down to program eligibility, when we think about who's qualified to be in the program, we want to be very mindful that we have a restorative mindset and approach the entire time that we're thinking about. We're creating this rubric of who can be involved. We don't want to be so rigid that people who truly need the program the most are now disqualified before you even review their case. And so, but again, you also have those influences of the justice systems that might say, oh, well, for example, for a domestic violence case, they might say, no choking. If there was choking in the police report, we don't refer this case. Well, there are cases where hand positions and during a scuffle might mimic choking, but the intent was not to choke. And so without doing like a thorough assessment of the situation outside of the police report, can I say that again? Outside of the police report, you don't get to, when you don't go outside of that, you don't get the inside scoop to see if maybe this is something that we really can support them in their healing journey from this incident. And so just be mindful that while you do create a rubric that says who is eligible, you just want to have some flexibility. And it might even be like a disclaimer that says subject to further review. So you bring them in, you see, oh, should we take them? If it's a box that they check off that disqualifies them, you have a referral and case review team that looks at it a little further to see if you can get more insight, because a lot of people truly need this work, and just one checkbox disqualifying them, to me, I think it just does a disservice to the community and to the work that we do. And then talking about program evaluation, we want to be sure that we have like we know that there are tangible and intangible ways to say whether or not the program was successful. I could go on for days about those beautiful stories that make you tear up, like, oh, the person went through the program and now he wants to refer others, he wants to come in and volunteer, all of those things. But that might not be captured in your evaluation and data collection. But having a really vast way to evaluate your program in those tangible ways is awesome, so that you can basically, check the success of your program, but it also helps to support for future funding. So I can't, exit that anymore, but they also do have services where people can support you in program evaluation and data collection. And then going down to timing. A lot of times timing can cause tension. We gotta do it by this, and we gotta start by this, and should the program be this amount of weeks or months, or this program is only this long, they won't want to do it if ours is longer. We just have to be mindful that restorative timing can look a little different from desired timing. Like Taninia said, sometimes restorative approach slows things down. So just being mindful of that. And lastly, of course, giving grace. Like they say, respect the process. So give grace to the process, and give grace to yourself as well. And really briefly, NCORJ is just an enormous resource source, to the work. The partnership between BJA, Vermont Law Grad School, University of Vermont, University of San Diego, huge kudos. So many things that if you go to the website, it's almost like you just have this whole shopping mall where you can just have at it. And then the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, there is a membership involved. However, they do have free access to certain webinars and other resources. I specifically mentioned the So You Want to Start a Restorative Justice Program in Your Community. This was facilitated by New York University's Center on Violence and Recovery, and could be a useful tool to some of the people going into this work. And that is all. I will turn it back over to our wonderful facilitators. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Hassani and Paco and Taninia. Wow, that was a lot of amazing wisdom, and I just appreciated your unique perspectives because you all are doing such different work. And I also recognize like the overlap and themes. So I'm noticing that quite a few questions have come in through the chat. Some of them have been answered in a written form, and then you'll notice some of them have been answered by saying we're going to answer that question live. So we can go to some of those live questions first, and also give Hassani a moment to check in on the questions that came through for her while she was talking. So I noticed there were a few for Paco. So I'll turn it over to you, Paco.
Yeah, sounds good. You might have to remind me on some of them, but I believe one of them was regarding restorative justice being a Western term. That is easy for me to say in practice and experience. It'll take time to explain, maybe in a different webinar. But I think the way that I use it is in order to spark a holistic and inclusive approach, a new path, not so new, but a path to addressing a harm that is different away from the criminal justice system, that is, again, put back into the hands of our community. That has been here forever. All the practices of resolving conflict, resolving, getting into conversations that are difficult when harm has occurred at home or within our community has been, since thousands of years, a millennia, been brought or dealt with within the community themselves. So that's why when we say restorative justice, it's not really a new approach. It's how we have determined to name it as we continue this movement moving forward. There's really no title, I guess. That's the short answer to that. With my experience, somebody else might have a different perspective on that. But with my experience, it's just a path of addressing harm that is no longer included in the criminal justice system, apart from the partnerships of referrals, right? And the fact that those stakeholders, whether it's justice partners, are also part of the community and being a part of it, of this way of addressing harm in a holistic and inclusive way.
Thank you,
That was a
Papa.
lot right there.
Yeah. And also, I'm wondering if Hassani or Taninia have thoughts on that as well, because it is a very complex and deep question that was asked. So I appreciate that very much. And I would also just add that it's not that there's not a title. I think every community has their own way of verbalizing the restoration and healing and relationship building that happens in all communities across the planet. I see Taninia unmuting though, so I'll turn.
Yeah, so I mentioned when I was speaking that we've now professionalized restorative justice, and originally it was not written. It was an oral tradition that was passed down from generation to generation. Everyone held circle in some way or another, and we can all trace back, if we trace our heritage, if we can trace our heritage back far enough, all continents have some sort of circle practice. They didn't have a jail. They didn't have someone judging someone else. They were in community with each other. The way that it shows, even the way that restorative justice shows up here is westernized, right? Because now people have to be certified. People are expected to be certified in it, and they write their scripts down. It doesn't come from that relational human space that it used to. So even oftentimes the way we practice restorative justice here, it has a Western hue to it. So everything Paco said, I just said it in a very different way, in a little bit of a different way.
Awesome. Thank you, Tania. And then the other question, I believe, was regarding Assembly Bill 60 and the protections around communication and pre-trial. So there are, that is also a different webinar, and I invite this question to be asked somehow, one way or another, in our next webinar, November 20th. With that said, of course, as we know, in the criminal justice system, we have different exit points along the way, earlier on, pre-arrest, pre-charge. There's a few safeguards already in place protecting communication around restorative justice. What is the communications happening within the program themselves with all participants? Pre-trial gets a little bit more difficult. There was an Assembly Bill 2833 this year that the California Restorative Justice Policy Coalition was trying to move forward. There were some hurdles along the way, some language that needed to change along the way, that then the coalition decided to move away from this late legislative season. It was not going to enter as authentically as it was first introduced due to some of the language that needed to change. With that said, it's still continued, I wouldn't say challenge so much, but more of a continued advocacy to create those safeguards within pre-trial restorative justice programming. If there's a way that we can have judges be involved in our communications, provide some sort of safeguards in a pilot program or a program within your office or your organization, that would be great. Through the memorandum of understanding language that is used in there and protecting communications would be great as well. But eventually, of course, our goal is to ensure the safeguards are on the books. So continue work with our legislative processes is going to be important as we move forward in protecting pretrial communication. Hopefully that was able, and like I said, maybe in on the 20th in that webinar, a couple other colleagues might have new information, different information to share within that topic.
Thanks, Paco. I see another question here from Julia. It's two parts. She said, what would be the first step for someone trying to bring RJ to their area for the very first time? Just your number one first step. And any advice for working in a rural area?
So maybe all three of you could share your thoughts on that.
Sure, I would love to. I guess first part of the question, I hate to answer a question with a question, but I would say that it depends on when you say, bringing it to your area. If you are trying to use it in like as a diversion to your common justice system or in your school, it would be starting with what systems you're trying to impact or what part of your communities you're trying to impact. So if it's youth diversion, or if it's something related to schools, would definitely start with your school districts or youth related community centers. Then if you're trying to work in justice systems, whether it's juvenile or adult, definitely looking at that part, like literally your DA's office, or there might even be already like try to find out what is existing in terms of diversion programming. If you're starting from scratch, that can actually be beautiful because then you have like molding clay, right? And so it's all about really identifying what area you're looking in. And when you say rural communities, that sparked something for me because working with some rural communities, I saw so many beautiful benefits of community and how close knit the community was. And so, for one, like trying to see who else might be on the same page as you and maybe forming like a council or some type of strong partnership of people who are going to go forth with the effort with you can be essential, and identifying what's already existing or what needs to exist, and start to fill in the gaps from there. But I've seen rural communities have such beautiful success because of how strong community is. And just like the answer to the former question, it goes back to more of the indigenous processes where this all stems from. And so it actually sometimes makes it a little easier because a lot of people know each other. A lot of people really want what's best for their community, and it takes a lot of the bureaucracy and red tape out of it. And I pause just because someone else might want to answer that or speak to that. Okay. I hope that answered it without knowing a little bit more of where you would, what area you try to implement. I don't want to be too wordy in one area and not, but that's what I could offer on that.
Thank you, Hassani.
Sure.
Very detailed. I appreciate it. Taninia and Paco, do you have any other thoughts on like first steps or just a different perspective, maybe than what Hassani was sharing, or anything to add on?
I think Sonny mentioned everything that I would have mentioned. I mean, community resources, know your resources that are around you, as a key first thing. Have almost like a library of the resources that are around you. Everything from even corporations to as mentorship programs to the YMCA's that are around there, the Boys and Girls Clubs, and all of that. be ready to go with that. That came in very helpful along the way. And Hassani said it beautifully when it came to the rural communities.
I would also add, if your community has never heard of it, to first do a culture and climate. Are there things that need to be addressed? And if things come up, then it's like a needs assessment so that you're addressing the needs of the community.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
all. I think we have time for one more question I see has come in. This question says, I work with people who are currently incarcerated, and I want to introduce a program aimed at developing victim awareness, empathy, and a sense of accountability. What advice do you have for getting started? Maybe I'll turn to Hassani to start for this one.
Certainly, glad. It is so refreshing to see so many prisons on the rise with using RJ in the prison system. What I've seen is they are identifying those inmates who have like leadership qualities in their housing units or however it's formed in there, and providing them with restorative justice training, educating them, and giving them like a leadership role. And they use it for a lot of times violence prevention and for post-incident processing. They also use it to build rapport and things like that. And so right now, I would just say that the first thing is to identify how you would get them trained. There are entities, of course, who are doing trainings in prisons. They are in person and virtual. And then going through the process of identifying who those inmates would be and what their roles would be once they are trained.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Paco, any other things to add?
Again, Hassani mentioned exactly what I would have mentioned, apart from maybe with my the Juvenile Justice Commission and my work there. I think it's important not just to, as a provider from our community, to come in and offer the services, just make sure that we're also involved in one way or another, allowing communities to come into these controlled environments to provide more opportunities for folks to learn these practices and bring back to our community, which is very important. That was a little bit of a a couple hurdles along the way with some of my commission work, where we really wanted to see more community come into the controlled environments and bring in more restorative work in order for them to then take this back into our community and continue strengthening their own lives doing this restorative work. So it's working with your county folks, different commissions and coalitions that are a part of these systems to ensure more community are allowed to come into contracts, create MOUs so they can come into these controlled environments and then transition, obviously, to continue more engagement outside once they go back into the care of our community is important there.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Well, it looks like we've answered all of the main questions that came through. So I really appreciate all of you who came to the webinar today and asked these great questions and were so engaged. We really appreciated you being here. And it was so wonderful to introduce you to three of our amazing coaches. Thank you to Nina, Hassani, and Paco for being here and sharing some of your experiences and your wisdom. And we have the slide up here about how to apply to the National Restorative Coaching Program. There's a link on the NCORJ website where you can fill out an intake form. It's an ongoing process, so you can apply anytime. Our coaching team is pretty full right now, so there's a bit of a wait list. But we'll be able to get to you with time. So please connect with us after this and send any questions you have to the Center for RJ at sandiego.edu. And then there's a few other slides as well. We've got our last webinar through the NCORJ coming up on Wednesday to finish out the year. So definitely check that out and register at the link. We would love to see you again on Wednesday.
And that's our last slide.
So thank you everyone for being here.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.